Hi, this is Shayla with Moms Learning with Moms. Our website is wholemotherhood.com, and we are just a group of women who learn and grow from each other. So go ahead and subscribe if you want to be part of that team. All right, we've got Amberlee here with us. Amberlee's been my friend for a few years, and she really is so knowledgeable about several things. But one of the things that I just love about and hearing about is her journey with her first child. She's got 4 children, and her first child's type 1 diabetic. And she just is really good at helping her with her insulin and seeing her numbers. And it's really interesting to learn about. So we're going to just go ahead and start that story from Amberlee.
So it started out, basically Lily was 7 and she was getting up at night, probably every 10 to 20 minutes to go to the bathroom. And I truly thought she was just being a pain and wanting to get out of bed. So I just told her to get back in bed. And she's like, no, I really have to go. But I ignored it. And then I realized that she wasn't growing and she wasn't keeping up with the other kids her age. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, but maybe she's just a smaller kid. And then she was eating like crazy. Her teacher was saying that she was complaining that I never fed her, which I did. And finally one day when she came home from school and had a snack of 3 bananas and said she was still hungry, I was like, all right, something's wrong. So she started talking with some friends that were doctors and looking on the internet. And finally I realized, oh my goodness, I think she's diabetic. So we took her into the doctor, and sure enough, she was. And by the way, they send you straight to the hospital when you find that out. So go and spend a few days in the hospital and learn about it. And you don't get to leave until you're able to give them a shot, which was definitely my worst nightmare at that moment.
And so that having her be diabetic, how did that change her lifestyle and your lifestyle?
Well, at first it was probably one of the most stressful things because you come home and you realize that you have to figure out how many carbs is in everything you give her when you have no concept of what a carb looks like. So they actually send you home with at least at Peyton Manning, a cookbook that has portions and carbohydrates and all that stuff in it. So we started out as I'm like stressing, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to figure out how much. Like you think you have to have it perfect. Like as a scientist, I'm like, I need to know exactly how many carbs. I need to know it by the 10th of a carb and be able to give her the right amount of insulin. And it's just not that way. Like it's way more lax than that. But you go in thinking that way. And so I took that book, and I mean, I cooked by that book probably for the first month because I didn't know how to do anything that was, I don't know, too high glycemic ratio index. We just avoided completely because it just took her out of control. Probably one of the biggest things that changed for us is they won't give you a continuous glucose monitor until about 6 months in because they want you to really understand what it is and how to do it without all the extra technology. So you have to get up in the middle of every night around between 2 and 4 a.m. to check their numbers, which it was like having a baby again. And I already had 2 babies that were 9 months old. So it was awful. So you're doing that, trying to figure out how to give them carbs. You have 2 insulins. One is what you take when you eat, but one you have to take at a specific time every day. And so you have to have that alarm set, and you've got to be on top of it because if you're off by an hour, it starts messing things up. And so it just put you in a whole different life.
So you had your twins about the same time that you were figuring all this out with Lily?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, they were 9 months old. Continued it. So it was an adventure, but it gets better. Like as you go along, you learn that. I mean, I think one of the best things someone said on this Diabetic Moms Facebook group is like, you don't have to be perfect. Their numbers don't have to be perfect. They're not going to be. It's normal to fluctuate. And so I guess when I realized that, the other thing is like 1 unit of insulin takes care of 15 grams of carbs for Lily at that time. It was like 15 to 18. So if you're off by 15 to 18 carbs, which is like a granola bar worth of carbs, it makes no difference because that's your level of consistency with insulin. And so, which is frustrating because it means you have less control. You know, if you're off by 15, you can really, jump up high, but that's just the level of control you're given. But when you move to a pump, you can go to within, half a gram of carbs. And so now we can keep her much more stable. But at the time, once I realized it doesn't matter so much because I can't keep it precise, I calmed down a lot more and I could look at it and be like, okay, that looks like about 50 grams plus or minus 10. It means I'm within the range. And so then you calm down a lot more.
So were you guys like pricking your finger every day to get a blood sample? Is that?
So being a data person, like I hated not knowing because she doesn't know what things feel like at that point. She doesn't know what it feels like to be low. She doesn't know. So she doesn't know what anything feels like. And so we were probably pricking her finger 8 to 10, 12 times a day. So where finally like her fingers, they were just pin cushions, And so, I mean, because she'd be there and you're like, you look off, but I don't know what. And so she had to learn to associate, okay, I am low. I am right where I should be. I'm high. This is what it feels like. This is what to look for, And so, but later on, after you get 6 months in, you can get a continuous glucose monitor, and I highly, highly recommend it.
What does that look like, Amberlee? What's a continuous glucose monitor?
So we put it in her arm. You can put it in your stomach. You can put it in your love handles if you have those. She was so thin, really the arm was the only place we could put it. And so it's like the size of a quarter. And you insert it every 10 days into the back of her arm. And it reads her numbers every 5 minutes. So I can see trends. I can see, is she going up? How fast is she going up? Is she going down? Is she about to go low? It sends alerts to the device she has, and it also goes straight to my phone. And I can set different alarms on my phone on what I want to see. So let's see, I can show you what that looks like. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So this is it right here. This shows her number. It shows the direction her numbers are going. And if I turn it sideways, I can see everywhere it's been for the last 24 hours.
Oh, wow. So where's the dip? Like about what time was that?
So that was the last 24 hours. This is right now. Right now she's 122. She stayed there about all night. I'd say an interesting thing I learned from that is I was able to see what trends she does. So I could figure out when to give her boluses. So I found it's easier to keep your numbers down than it is to bring them down. If I'm trying to bring her down, it can take me 3 hours to get her down from 300, 350, right? And it's awful. But to keep her down is really easy. So I learned insulin takes 15 minutes to hit, right? So you have a 15-minute gap before it hits. So certain foods, depending on their glycemic index, will hit at different points. So if you have, let's say, juice, it's going to hit you in 15, like it's going to hit you really fast and it's going to hit you hard. You're going to spike really high, really fast, have a really steep curve. If you have, let's say, bacon, it's 0 carbs, so it's not going to do anything. If you put bacon with your juice, you're going to kind of lower that curve and slow down how quickly it hits you. If you have fat in there, so let's say cheesecake, I won't give her a bolus or a dose of insulin I'll give her 20% up front, and then I'll give her the rest in 2 hours because I know that there's enough fat in there that it's really not going to hit her for 2 hours.
Wow.
So if she's going to have juice, she's going to have to take her bolus 10, 15 minutes before she drinks it. So that way you're balancing when the insulin hits and when the carbs hit. And if you can balance that, you can keep them really level.
Hmm.
So it's all about knowing how each type of food group affects your body, your blood sugar, and then balancing out with how quickly your insulin works.
So you probably use fat quite a bit in balancing her, like, is that kind of a general rule to use fat to use it?
Depends. Fat is good, but it can also be tricky. So if you go, let's say Chinese food is the bane of our existence. It is so high in carbs and so high in fat that it hits and it slowly releases over hours, and you simply can't do that with your insulin. Like, you'd have to give boluses every 30 minutes for like 5 hours. That's probably about how long it lasts in her system. And so it's just really hard to control. Whereas cheesecake, if you have a plain cheesecake, is so low in carbs, it's not a big deal. You can kind of just hit it a little at the end.
You just ruined my favorite Chinese place for me.
Right. Fiber is actually negative carbs. So if you're calculating your carbs, you take the fiber that you have in your food and subtract it from the carbs you have. So you can use fiber to kind of help cancel some of your carbs. You can use protein. Protein helps stabilize. So I'll usually use protein the most. And then if you do a good amount of protein with some fat, then you can really just level things off pretty nicely and kind of keep it in control.
So what do you like to see her numbers at consistently? Was it the 122 that you kind of hold it at or try to?
So 120 is our goal during the day. One thing that people kind of make a mistake with is they are terrified of low numbers. And so they'll try to avoid 80. So 80 is like our low, right? Once you hit 80 as a diabetic, it's considered low. And that's simply because people aren't in control enough typically to be able to maintain an 80. But if you can get in control, as our endocrinologist said, he said 80, 70 is even a normal number for you and me. And so it's not a scary number if you know what you're doing. So in all honesty, so what she has right now won't let her go under 80. It's near impossible. But when she was just on shots, I would run her at 65, 70 at night, which is unheard of for a diabetic because people don't do that. But that's where her body really likes to be at night naturally. And so as long as you know that she's steady, you can let her ride there all the time. It only feels really low if you're not used to it. So a lot of people will ride at 200, which is dangerous. You shouldn't be up there because they're too afraid of going low. So when they get to normal numbers, say 100, they're going to feel low because that's not what they're used to feeling like. So it's important that you kind of run in your good zone so that you know what good should feel like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'd say just don't be afraid of low numbers as long as you keep things in control.
Can Lily feel that? Can she gauge herself?
She can now, and we can tell when she's probably under 75 is when she'll start feeling it. But she doesn't feel things the same way. I'll be honest, we've been down at, which is this actual scary number, 35. And we had no idea until all of a sudden she felt faint. Like, she just doesn't always get a feeling with it, which can be a little bit scary. But now she has a pump. It's called a TSlim, a tandem TSlim. And so it hooks into her stomach, her thighs, wherever, and actually interacts with her Dexcom and adjusts her insulin. So if she's going up really fast, it'll actually up her insulin level. If she's going down really fast, it'll shut off her insulin. And so it actually will not let her get under 80 for very long because it shuts off her insulin to adjust it. And she balances out a lot better because it'll up her insulin. It'll give her extra boluses if she's not coming down. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, like what does this cost to do for her? This must be a lot.
So So her pump is $10,000,
Mm.
but as long as you have insurance, you can get it covered. So I'd say the biggest thing is getting good insurance, or as long as you don't make like crazy money, you can get on what's called Children's Special Health Care Services Indiana. And that's a state insurance that you can apply for that'll cover diabetic supplies. But it only covers required diabetic supplies. So it covered her pump completely. It covers her insulin completely, but it will not cover her Dexcom because it's not considered required. But without that, let's say when we first got out of the hospital, so just to get the insulin, the needles, the test strips, all that, I think that's it that you had to start with, for 1 month was $2,200. So insulin, I'd say, was around $1,500 a month because you had 2 different types of insulin. And then the others are pretty expensive as well. So you definitely want to get another insurance as long as you qualify for it, or better insurance. Our insurance now, actually, our insulin's free. But something I learned the other day is if you go to the manufacturer of insulin, you can usually get it cheaper. So if you go to Eli Lilly and say, hey, I need insulin, you can get it for $35 a month rather than the for one of them $1,500, $900 that they were charging me at CVS. So that's something I just learned 2 days ago.
Wow.
So an important thing, no, but it is crazy expensive, and so it's important to kind of find your resources. Get on the Children's Special Health Insurance. If you don't qualify for that, call the manufacturer and you can typically get that. You can go to Canada, just cross the border, and you don't need a prescription. You can get all the same insulins that you get here there, and they are $20-$30 a vial. I have a friend who goes there every 6 months and just gets what she needs for 6 months and brings it back. Pump supplies we get every 3 months and cost us $900 for the 3 months. And then her Dexcom supplies are $1,800 every 6 months. And that's without insurance stepping in. So that's why insurance is so important for us, for a diabetic, because there's no way we could keep up with those costs ever.
Right. How does so Lily has had this for about 6 years that you've been on this, and you and I have just talked a little bit about how exercise helps her keep those levels steady.
Oh yeah. So I can tell when she hasn't been up and moving a bunch because her numbers are just out of control in a sense. Like, it's hard to keep her down. She's just running really high. She requires, honestly, more insulin. So we have to up her rates. So I just send her out and I say, all you have to do is like walk for 30 minutes every day, or go for a run, or go jump on the trampoline. Like, it really doesn't matter what it is. But by doing that, she requires less insulin and her numbers are just much more stable. They're less erratic. Her body can utilize that insulin more efficiently, and it is a huge difference. I have a nephew who's diabetic, and they always called him a brittle diabetic. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but a lot of older people use that term for someone who just they call them just very sensitive. It's hard to keep them in control. They're very erratic. And from going through this, I've learned a brittle diabetic is simply someone who's not in control. Someone who doesn't have their different ratios set up right. Someone who doesn't exercise. Someone who eats things without taking proper boluses. Like, we always bolus before she eats. We don't do it after, because then I'm chasing her numbers all day.
If I say that word again, bolus.
A bolus is like a shot of insulin.
Okay.
So if I give her the insulin before she eats, then I'm maintaining her numbers at a good level. if I give it after she eats, or a lot of times, like my nephew would take it an hour after he ate. Well, then you're chasing their numbers all day long, and it's a mess. And so they call them brittle diabetics, but really you just, you don't know what you're doing, truthfully. Or I have another friend whose daughter is diabetic, and she's like, oh yeah, I can't keep her numbers in control, and explains what's going on. I told her, I'm like, she needs more long lasting insulin. You need to up her ratios. If you do that, she'll just be level off. And so people don't take the time to understand like how the food affects them, what all the ratios mean, how the different insulins affect them, so they know what needs to be adjusted. Because if you don't do that, you can be out of control. You only see your doctor every 4 months. And I probably change her insulin levels every month and a half. So if you're not watching that, you're going to be out of control for 2.5, 3 months, and not know why you can't keep them in control.
Amberlee, what are the resources then? Like, what can people turn to get this help and figure it out?
Most of it I just figured out by watching. So for me, I see trends. Like that's been my job for forever as a chemical engineer, is you watch trends and figure out, how the different inputs affect it. But for people who don't see that, if you just write down like, okay, here's what I gave my child, here are the ratios we went at, an hour later they were, they went up really high, 2 hours later they crashed, then you can start seeing the trends with different foods and seeing how you need to adjust things. You can talk to your doctor. Like I probably spend a good hour every time talking with an endocrinologist, learning different things. Then, okay, how does this insulin affect them? Why did you change this number? What did you look for to know that needed to happen? And realizing it's okay to experiment. Like I'd sit there, if I just up her rate 1 unit, see what it does. How does it affect them? Did it change it this way, that way? Up at 2 units. Let's just see. The rule of thumb is you up by 10% and you're not going to screw things up. So you can always up by 10% every couple of days and just see what it does, and kind of see how your child's body reacts, and then you can kind of learn how to change things to keep things level.
So every body is going to be different. You do have to experiment with your own.
Yes. Like even so, Lily's about to be 13, right? Starting into puberty. We have to adjust things all the time because now her body responds differently than it did, say, last year. And so you just have to say, okay, we've hit a change. Let's start experimenting. Let's change things a little bit, and realize it's okay to change things. It's okay to experiment. I mean, I panicked one time. Her long-lasting insulin, I accidentally gave it to her. She gave it to herself and I gave it to her. We had no idea. Like we accidentally double dosed her. And I was like, oh my goodness, the world is ending. I have to call the doctor. We're going to have to go to the hospital. Like we've just ruined everything, right? And she was fine. Like we fought lows some, but it wasn't extreme. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't realize how much it takes to be extreme.
Wow.
So I mean, now if you double dose for the food you ate, that's a different story. Then you're in trouble. But yeah, just realize it's okay to experiment and watch and just really learn what everything's for, so that you can keep things under control.
Yeah. Do you have anything else that you can think of that would be helpful for others to know about you guys' process in this?
I'd say one of the big things that changed for us is she ate a lot of, so when you go in and they say fight a low, they give you Skittles. And the amount of Skittles she was eating because of that big variance in shots, she'd probably eat 6 to 8, little fun size packs of Skittles a day, which is awful because we really don't eat sugar in my house. And it was driving me crazy. But when you have that kind of variance, like there's just no way to keep from doing that. Like there just isn't. So by changing to a pump, I fought changing to a pump for a long time because I thought, I don't know, why change to that if you don't need it? I really don't even know why. I just thought it'd be too complicated, too much. We don't need it. We're good where we are. And changing to a pump was the best thing I ever did. Like ever. She never I can't say never. 99% of the time does not need a fast acting carb because her pump is that fast acting carb. It shuts off her insulin and balances everything out for her. So we went from having sugar all the time to never needing it. We went from having to get up in the middle of the night to fight lows because you hit random things, to her pump takes care of it. I don't get up at night at all anymore, ever. And when you get up to fight a low, you're up for 3 hours at least, like minimum. And so we don't have that anymore. I mean, it's life-changing, to be honest. That pump is the best thing we ever did.
How does Lily feel? Does she feel picked on, or is she just used to this sort of?
She does feel picked on because, so you don't have to watch what you eat, but you kind of do, right? So I'd say we let her splurge when she can splurge. Like if it's a birthday party, it's a church activity, I say have at it. And now that she has a pump, she can do that. When you have shots, you have to kind of balance out, is it worth taking a shot? You know what I mean? I already took a shot for this portion that I ate. Is it worth taking another one to have this, right? Well, now she just puts it in her pump. She doesn't have to take a shot. She's no longer a pincushion. And so she can behave more normally. She can graze where she couldn't graze before. She can, I don't know, just be normal. And so that's made a big difference for her. But I rarely let her have soda just because I rarely let any of my kids have soda. But I especially don't with her because it can be a challenge on your blood sugar. We can keep it in control, but if you're doing that all the time, it just stresses your system and kind of throws things out of whack. If she's high because she didn't take a bolus when she was supposed to, I don't let her have dessert. I say you can't eat dessert because if you're already up here and you eat, you're only going to go up higher. You don't go down, right? So let's say she's at 250 and we always want her below 180. She's at 250 and we're like, hey, we're having cake. Well, you're going to go up to 300 plus because you can only go up from there, right? So you're just getting more and more dangerous, and that puts, added stress on your kidneys and your eyes and your whole system. So I'd say that's the most unfair thing she finds, is that she doesn't get treats if she's not in control. But it does give her incentive to keep it in control.
It makes me want to put one in myself just to see where the levels go and everything. It's so interesting to me to see the numbers and how that food affects.
So your insulin reacts a lot faster, which they are working on. We just got an insulin that's called like ultra fast acting insulin. So it's supposed to respond in 5 to 10 minutes rather than 15. Ours responds in 5 minutes or less. And so you see a lot fewer fluctuations because of that. So if you watched, you probably wouldn't ever get below, say, 74, 69, somewhere in there. And you probably wouldn't get anywhere above 135. But you can tell, like when you eat cereal, you're going to jump really high, really fast, and then you're going to drop. So that's another thing we don't eat. We don't eat cereal because it's something that doesn't work within the time range of insulin, because you have to take your insulin 15 minutes before you eat it to hit the same time that spike hits. But then it drops so quickly that your insulin's still going. So then you drop so low that you have to take a fast acting carb, and you're just fighting this up and down because it doesn't match the timeline of insulin. And you can feel that in your body when you eat cereal, because you'll eat it and an hour later you're like, I'm famished and I'm cranky. And that's what you're feeling, is that just sudden drop that doesn't match how insulin works.
So Amberlee, run me through like a day or a 2-day, like food wise, what holds her steady or is best for her?
So I'll be honest, typically she doesn't eat breakfast. But if she does, we usually do like an egg sandwich. We do an egg sandwich. She is like, that's like our golden breakfast. And so she can bolus for that when she eats it. she's going to stay super steady because it's so high in protein. There's no fast acting carbs in there. For lunch, she'll have like a meat sandwich or a peanut butter and honey sandwich with some chips. We throw some fruit in there. The peanut butter or meat's going to help kind of balance things out. But usually her lunch, we're going to bolus a little bit earlier because she has things like some gummies or, a little treat in there. And so that one, you'll usually see a higher spike. Dinner we do, because of our allergy child, we do a lot of like Thai food, stuff like that. So we'll do stir fries and whatever. So we do a lot of vegetables in there. We do some meat and then some rice. And those are actually really easy to bolus for because the meat and vegetables help balance everything out. And then the rice just kind of gets her up there. So we'll say like a cup of rice is around 40-45 grams. So we'll just measure. I don't have to measure anymore. I now know what that looks like. But before, you'd measure out a cup of rice, and then the meat and vegetables are free. So you just throw those on top and bolus for that and go for it. You do have a time at night or during the day where your body doesn't react to insulin very well. For her, it's 9 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock until morning. Her body does not react. She can eat something and take a bolus, and she needs 2-3 times as much insulin to deal with that snack, right? So our endo just says, just avoid eating after that time if you can. Because it's true, like you give her the right amount of insulin, the ratios are correct, but her body just doesn't accept it. It's like, I'm done working.
And what time is that you stop?
For her, it's like 9 o'clock, 9:30. Because you can see anytime she eats something like that, she'll go up and you just cannot get her down. It doesn't matter how much insulin you give her, she just rides high. So we try to avoid eating anything after that time.
Probably keeps a lot of your family healthy also. I mean, just watching that.
Oh yeah, we do that. Like we do not eat cereal. We rarely eat Chinese food. We make a lot of our Asian food at home. That's just lower carb. We sweeten everything with honey. We put a ton of vegetables in, where you see orange chicken and they have all that sweet syrup on there and like no vegetables. It's all carbs and sugar and fat. We load it up with vegetables because it just helps balance everything out. Make it healthier. So the whole family eats the same way. It gets easier. Join groups, talk to people, and just realize you don't have to be perfect, and don't be afraid of lows, and you'll get better as you go along. Eventually you can look at a meal and be like, that's this many carbs, and you're close enough to call it good.
And then find something that helps you with some sort of food addiction, and find something else that you love to go do that night. Instead of snacking on your chips and salsa.
Love my chips and salsa. No, her favorite thing right now, if it's late and she wants a snack, she takes a string cheese and she wraps that in ham, and then she wraps that in bacon. Just so not healthy, but she can eat it without affecting a thing, and she loves it. And then she'll heat it up so it's like a meat wrapped mozzarella stick, and makes her happy.
I'm gonna try that. That sounds delicious.
That's really good.
That is cool. Amberlee, this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're gonna turn this off and just keep learning.